Welcome to the next episode of the Amateur Wino. Today I'm going to taste a number of different wines, and I'm going to start with this one, the 2007 Wild Horse Central Coast Pinot Noir. This one is from, I believe, the San Luis Obispo area of California. One of the things I'm going to try and do today is see if I can find a good Pinot Noir from California at a reasonable price. For me, traditionally, this has been a tough category to find good Pinot for $20 or less, which I think is pretty easy to do with some other varietals like Cabernet Sauvignon or Shiraz, also known as Syrah, or Malbec. But Pinot is a tough grape to grow, as people like to say, and it's tough to find good Pinot at a reasonable price. This one sells for about $20 or a little bit less, and I've had some pretty decent experiences with it before. So let's give the 2007 vintage a try. Now the color of this wine is very typical for Pinot. It's what I would describe as kind of a ruby or garnet color, and if you take a look inside, you'll see that there's a little bit of a kind of a pinkish color to it. I think that's very normal and not necessarily dark the way a lot of California Pinots are these days. A good healthy color in my book. I'm going to take a sniff here, and on the nose I'm getting definitely kind of a jammy fruit, which some people think is very characteristic of California Pinot. Very ripe flavors and that kind of thing, especially in comparison to wines from Burgundy, which are kind of the benchmark for Pinots. And Burgundies typically have a lot of acidity to balance out the fruit and a lot of earthy elements. California Pinot, in my experience, has been fruitier and but also very aromatic in its own way. And this one definitely gives off some ripe smelling fruit, a little bit jammy to me. So imagine strawberries, but a little bit of a baked aroma to it. And also a little bit of a kind of leathery, earthy thing. Very subtle compared to a lot of Burgundies that feature that kind of aroma more prominently, but let's go ahead and give it a taste. One interesting thing about this wine is, even though by aroma I thought it was going to be very jammy, once I taste it, on the palate there's actually a good amount of acidity there. Acidity is just kind of a fancy word for sourness or tanginess, and it's viewed by most people as a very important part of the structure of a wine. And acidity is important because it gives a wine a little bit of backbone to age, and more importantly for a wine like this, which I normally drink young anyway, it makes it a good match with food, because an overly sweet wine will make food that's not sweet seem more bitter by comparison. A food with nice acidity kind of brings out the flavors in food, in my experience, and this one certainly seems like it would be a good food wine. Now this wine's from the San Luis Obispo area of California, which makes it considered Central Coast of California. In my experience, most California Pinots have no problem getting to proper ripeness, even if they're from Northern California. And in this case, I think there's a decent balance of ripeness and acidity. Now, if we want to talk about the stages of tasting, a lot of people like to describe the initial taste impression that you get from a wine on your tongue, or in your mouth, rather. They like to call that the attack. And the attack on this wine is definitely a lot of fruit up front, and a bit of a tart cherry thing as well. Now, the next stage is what people describe as being the mid palate, meaning how does it feel on your tongue after that initial taste? How does it linger? And then the final stage would be what we call the finish. How long does it stay on your tongue? Do the flavors kind of reverberate in your mouth? And in this case, I would say that there's kind of a hollow mid palate. After the initial taste impression of fruit and acidity, it just tastes a little bit thin, a little dilute. I think that's not necessarily a flaw in a wine that costs $20 or less, especially when we're talking Pinot Noir. And again, like I said, I don't think that that's a knock on this wine. I think it's going to be good with food. It's just not necessarily a great wine for drinking on its own. And the finish, you feel tannins. And tannins are a compound in the wines that makes your tongue feel like it's furry, or gives your mouth kind of a puckery feeling. And the tannins generally come from the stems of the grapes and from the skins of the grapes. And one way that you can kind of define for yourself and know that you're feeling tannins is you ask yourself, do I feel a furriness on my tongue? Is it similar to when I have tea that's kind of steeped too long and really strong, to give you that kind of puckery feeling? Overall, I think this is a well-made wine, decent. Nothing outstanding about it, but it's a good match with food. And for a $20 table wine, I think for a lot of people this will be considered kind of an everyday wine as opposed to a special occasion wine. And I think it definitely serves its purpose. So that's my review on the 2007 Wild Horse Pinot Noir. And this is the Sebastiani 2006 Sonoma Coast Pinot Noir. It costs about $13 to $15 retail in the store. This wine is from the Sonoma region of California, and it very much smells like California Pinot Noir. It has a very ripe fruit smell. When I smell this one, I smell cherries. I smell kind of a strawberry jam kind of smell. And don't worry if you can't really put your finger on those kinds of things. When you start out, just smell a wine and see if you like the smell of it and like the taste of it. It's that simple. Do I like it or do I not like it? When you want to get beyond that, you can try and pick out what kind of scents that you smell. And the common things that you'll smell in a Pinot Noir are fruit, like I said. You'll sometimes smell kind of a vanilla smell, which comes from the wine being aged in oak barrels. And sometimes you'll even get floral scents from a wine. This one to me just smells like a really syrupy, jammy, fruity wine. And that's completely fine for a wine at this price level. It's really tasty and fruity, and Pinot Noir pairs really well with a lot of different foods. One of the common pairings that people suggest for Pinot Noir is salmon. And I also find that lighter meats like chicken or turkey go well with Pinot Noir. So all in all, I find this wine, the Sebastiani Pinot Noir, 2006 Sonoma Coast, to be a good value at about $15 for the consumer. In the end, I give a slight edge to the Wild Horse Pinot Noir. It's a bit better balance between acidity and fruit, and it has a bit more complexity. Both of these wines are good picks for budget Pinot Noir, although I've had better experiences with the Sebastiani in previous vintages. On the next episode of Amateur Wino, we travel to California's Russian River Valley to do barrel tastings at Copain Wines. We sat down for a chat with winemaker Wells Guthrie. Be sure to catch that chat and a review of one of Wells's wines in episode 3 of the Amateur Wino.